Yes, hello there, Adam Cleary, the ghost of content past, raised from the dead, because somebody apparently put on the Christmas list that they'd like me to present an end-of-year wrestling list. Trust me, I'm as annoyed as you are, but here we are. But yes, what a strange 12 months for pro wrestling, brackets, and literally everything else, close brackets, that was. Like, the profession was just constantly plagued by problems in a year when a literal plague was itself a problem. If you had this written down in your predictions last year, then you've done all right. But you know what? Despite everything that went on in the world, despite everything that happened, despite everything that changed wrestling, despite everything that changed life, despite all of that, there's a lot of really, really good matches in the past 12 months. A lot of wrestlers seem to take the challenge of the entire world going mad, flip it on its head, and produce something brilliant as a direct result of it. Everybody would have had a pass this year if they'd done nothing of note, and yet there is so much stuff to talk about. I'm going to get straight into it fairly soon, but before we start, I just want to say that even in a critical dearth as it was, WWE still had some absolute blinders. NXT kind of went completely off the rails in terms of how it writes its episodes, but its performers continued to deliver. AEW blew up, became mainstream, is now this legitimate wrestling force in a very, very short space of time. New Japan was as good as it always was, and the indies, whenever they could try and make an impact, made an impact. I mean, just think about the stuff that isn't even in this list. Spoilers, by the way. Kenny Omega and Trent wrestled in a gym and it was fantastic. Tomohiro Ishii was unbelievable in the G1 climax. Cody Rhodes was amazing all year. Chris Jericho was really underrated by everybody for his in-ring work, in my opinion. And this was finally the year they turned Roman Reigns heel. And would you believe it? It was so much better than when they were trying to have us cheer him. Who would have thought? Oh, that's a very nice little introduction, Adam. Could you be more specific, perhaps? Yes, I could. Just give me a goddamn second. My name is Adam Cleary, and these are the 10 best pro wrestling matches of 2020. Number 10, Jon Moxley versus Minoru Suzuki, New Japan Pro Wrestling New Beginning. Very difficult one to describe this because the dynamic of it was just so perfect, but not perfect in a way that should work for professional wrestling. It was more like a fight at the back of the school gates. It was just pure bloodlust, and everything about it was mutual. The aggression, the hatred, but even the sportsmanship and the respect between the two, everything was on such a perfect, even keel. And the weird thing is that meant that there was an equal enjoyment to be had from the match. You could tell both men were enjoying working each other in such a brutal way, to the point where it became almost like just a celebration of brutality as much as a contest of it, if that makes sense. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Ichi the Killer, but it basically presents this idea of what happens if the ultimate sadist and the ultimate masochist met each other, which would give first. And in this match, Jon Moxley could just absorb so much pain. He was enjoying it. And of course, Suzuki, being a complete sadist, he was just dishing that out without a second thought for his opponent. It was pretty much the premise of that film, just sweatier. Best bit by an absolute mile, of course, was Suzuki riffing on Mox's own pose after he just brained him in the skull. But overall, this was just a B-movie fight of carnage and brutality. And if you've got friends who don't like pro wrestling, but they're a bit squeamish, show them this and enjoy how much it makes them uncomfortable. Number 9, Io Shirai versus Rhea Ripley, NXT, November the 18th. Would have been an absolute travesty if Io Shirai hadn't made this list in some capacity. She's probably been, like, she has an argument to have had the best 12 months in pro wrestling out of anybody, in my opinion. Yeah, a couple of big names probably overdo it there, but not too many. And yet, there wasn't really one match that underpinned the whole thing. Her story has been one of just this absurd, entertaining consistency. However, thankfully, she had that match against Rhea Ripley on NXT towards the end of the year, which was, how do I put this eloquently? Mwah! Thing is, we're so starved of like actual compelling in-ring storytelling in WWE that when we do see it, there is a temptation to over-egg how impressive it was. And when I first saw this match, when they told all the story of the limbs and the power game and they're both trying to stop each other doing their key thing, I thought maybe I'm just judging this too kindly because WWE does it so rarely. And yet on a rewatch, nah, in any promotion in the world, this would be an amazing match. The thing that annoyed me about Io Shirai winning the title off Charlotte was that she didn't pin Charlotte. There was an element of opportunism about that win, which the strength of her in-ring work did not need. She is the best woman in that division, arguably the best woman in pro wrestling at the minute. She didn't need to just kind of sneak in and steal one and let the actual champion get away with it. And here, where there was no triple threat stipulation, there was no way of getting around stuff, she scored as clean a victory as you like against the most physically impressive woman in pro wrestling. As well as the limb work and the storytelling, it was this whole end of a story for Io Shirai. She has taken on every single woman in that division and she has beaten them all as the division's ace, I might add. had all challengers stepped up, she beat them all in very individual matches, but Ripley had been cycled out of the title picture. What she brought to the table hadn't been conquered in any shape or form. She was the brute, she was the strong one. She had what Io Shirai didn't, and yet Io found a way by powerbombing her through a table. And of course there was the incredible camera work at the end of Ripley getting back into the ring, only for Shirai to land an absolutely brutal looking moonsault. I thought this was NXT's best match by a mile this year, and almost women's wrestling's best match by a mile this year, but either way it was stellar. Number 8, Stadium Stampede, AEW Double or Nothing. Alright, okay, I'm trying to keep this list not very controversial. I've not gone for any mad picks that you'll never have seen just to prove that we're incredibly cool. But I understand if people see this and go, really? Stadium Stampede, one of the best matches of the year? And to you, I say, yes. Here's the thing. If the world hadn't gone mad, Stadium Stampede would have been okay. It would have been fine. It would have been a bit of fun, a bit of frivolity, something daft to just keep so many of the roster busy until more important things came along. But the crucial thing there is that the world did go mad. The bottom line is we needed Stadium Stampede. We needed that much fun and that much frivolity and that much entertainment and that much ingenuity. We needed to see at the start of all of this that even with empty arenas, even with fans gone, even with everything going completely insane, that wrestling could still work. And everybody involved in this match brought new ideas to the table. They did something that they thought would entertain people regardless of their pro wrestling affiliation, regardless of what kind of wrestling you like. They found some of it in Stadium Stampede, and for like however long it was just brilliant. But the really interesting thing about it is that the actual wrestling in it was great. Like, the Young Bucks had so much fun, but it was all PWG-inspired frivolity. Kenny Omega had an absolutely brutal brawl in a bar with Santana and Ortiz. Hangman Page hit that goddamn flip thing from the most acute angle you've ever seen. Like, that's just impressive, if nothing else. It was the feel-good moment of pro wrestling this year for me, and it was the feel-good win of pro wrestling this year. Like, every single person who watched this has a different favourite moment. Although I will say if your favourite moment is not Chris Jericho back elbowing a mascot in the face, then you are wrong, but I'll let you get away with it. Number 7, Daniel Bryan versus AJ Styles, SmackDown June 12th. I know I opened this video by saying, wow, what a weird year that was, but it does kind of remind me of the fact that I have been presenting videos on pro wrestling for about 4 years now, and at the end of every single one of those years, I will do a video about WWE, and I will say, wow, wasn't that a weird year for WWE? I think probably time we admit it's just a weird company. Even by their standards, it was a weird year. Like, take away all the global whatever and the Thunderdome and the Money in the Bank and the empty arenas, and take all that away. Very divisive year creatively for them. They seem to plunge new depths while at the same time wasting some of the best ever talent they had. And yet, you are never going to find a match more unifying in its brilliance than this. For a company that just loves sports entertainment, it was just such a celebration of just actual wrestling. Like, it looked painful, it looked dramatic, it looked convincing, it was really, really, really fast paced without ever feeling like it was just rushing through itself. Some of the spots they were able to put together weren't like dramatically eye-catching, but when you watch them back, they were just such incredibly clever pro wrestling. Like the bit where Bryan has to drop down to the mat because one of his arms is hurt and he still manages to get the knee up in the gut. It's just really, really well done. The kind of thing WWE doesn't normally let its performers do. Like, limb work is one of those things that a lot of people who talk about wrestling like to go on about, but 9 out of 10 fans don't really notice or really care about. And yet in this match, you did believe it all. You felt all the punishment that was going into it. When they wouldn't release their holds, you understood why they were doing that. The fact that there was no fans here, just performance center recruits, kind of tells you what they were doing. They weren't putting on a show for a crowd. They were putting on a clinic, a masterclass for people trying to learn the craft. I know it's quite hard to judge how good a wrestling match is when there's not a crowd there to reciprocate the energy and the noise and the feeling and whatnot, but you just watch this back and you watch Charles Robinson, the referee. He is genuinely terrified of what's happening in that ring and then engaged by it, aroused by it almost, I would say. There's no better indicator than that. Great. Number 6, Sasha versus Bayley, WWE Hell in a Cell. I would like to think that my opinion of this wrestling match is not coloured by my relief at this wrestling match, because we have all said, fans of every single promotion for years and years and years, when they finally do Sasha and Bayley again, it had better be good. They circled the plug hole with it for 2 years, then they started teasing it and doing bits of it, and it wasn't very good. And then finally, finally this year, it felt like they were letting them do their own thing. The clues were dropped in, the little tells were here, the little mystery to it came back, and all of a sudden we felt like we had a really, really engaging story between the two that we prayed would be paid off in the ring. We didn't know. Sasha can spend as much time looking at a belt as we like. We can get the relief of the heel turn, whatever show they want to put it on. It just still has to deliver in the ring. And heading into Hell in a Cell, that's what it all hinged on. Would this match actually be good? And oh my God, thank God this match wasn't just fine, didn't just deliver, but it then excelled. It then took the story they had built into new dimensions. The chemistry between these two, we feared it had gone, but it had not. They were, I don't know, it was so weird putting this match next to the Roman Reigns and Uso match that came on the same show because it's so different. The intensity is not there. The hatred, the story is very similar, and yet the two matches play out completely differently because this was something only Sasha and Bayley could have delivered. And yes, some critics did say it was a bit overbooked in parts, there was too much going on, but just think about how long this story has rattled on for. The whole thing has been overbooked. How else do you then pay all that off in one pro wrestling match? The added story of Sasha's pay-per-view record as well, everything about it. Now granted, it might not have been purely in isolation one of the best wrestling matches you've ever seen, but wrestling is so informed by its stories and so informed by the performers in there. So much went into that cell and they played with every single bit of it. But again, don't get me wrong, I don't want to make this all about the relief I felt at this match delivering, because that shouldn't determine whether or not something's one of the best matches of the year. But that relief was informed by the drama, and the drama informed the action, and the action, I'm pleased to say, was sensational. Number 5, Walter versus ILJA Dragunov, NXT UK, October 29th. This is a match that could only have taken place in an empty arena. Honestly, if this had been in front of a crowd, how uncomfortable they felt would have eventually started to ruin what you were seeing. There would have been, you know in The Simpsons, that kid crying, please stop, he's already dead. That would ruin a wrestling match for you. That would kill a boner. Here's the story, right? Walter is a killer. He is big, he is strong, he is technically proficient, he is fast, and he is agile. ILJA Dragunov is a fantastic pro wrestler, but he is not as strong as Walter. He is not as big as Walter. He is not as technically proficient as Walter. He is not as quick as Walter, and he is not as agile as Walter. In every measurable metric, Walter had the advantage over him. In short, right, Dragunov went into that match and he was fucked. And what wrestling companies normally do in that situation is they make a farce of all of that. There is some fluke, some element of luck, something that just happens which redresses the balance. NXT UK did not do that. ILJA Dragunov was so ILJA Dragunov got. And in the silence of that arena, ILJA Dragunov beat him to a pulp, and they kept raising the stakes. Every single time you thought, oh, this'll break his spirit, Dragunov got back up, and they didn't just rehash the premise, they elevated it up a notch. Hence why they got into the really awful looking neck stuff towards the end, because that was the only place it could conceivably go, and it kept going there. This is a wrestling experience unlike any other to watch. It's harrowing. And the really impressive thing about it is there was no crowd willing him on. There was nobody he was doing this for. There was nobody to lift him up when his own energy wasn't there. He was just doing it. The emptiness, the silence made this haunting and made this really, really difficult to watch. No pro wrestling match this year, I would honestly say, has made you feel as much as this match made people feel. And in front of a crowd, it wouldn't have worked. Number 4, Kenny Omega versus Pac, AEW Dynamite, February 26th. Now, I suspect some of you may know me on this channel as the NXT guy. I did the NXT show for a good long old while. I banged that drum for NXT, didn't I, when it started the Wednesday Night Wars. I just hope everybody has a great time. That was my mentality towards it. But honestly, at the back of my mind, I thought, you know what? NXT's great because it's got much better wrestlers, and AEW is going to take some time to get to that kind of level. February 26th, that's when I shut up about that. Basically, the first 15 minutes of Kenny Omega versus Pac are some of the most exhilarating pro wrestling you've ever seen anywhere. Never mind on pay-per-view or whatever. On television, you got to watch this, and it was just that's what it did to you. And the thing is, Kenny Omega is known the world over for being able to put on these masterclass pro wrestling matches, but he has not a formula, but he has a way that he works the big pay-per-views that have led to 6-7 star rated matches, right? But he managed to adapt that for TV. Here, he condensed it down into something that would exist between adverts and in the middle of another show. It was incredible. What was really good about this, though, was that the idea that these two men were so obsessed with wrestling and obsessed with each other that there was almost nowhere for them to go. Like, there's a part where Pac comes off, tries to hit a moonsault, Omega catches him, but before he can even devise a counter, Pac then seamlessly turns that into one of the sickest DDTs you've ever seen to give you this concept that he has done nothing but spent weeks in Newcastle studying Kenny Omega to know exactly what to do in every scenario. And if you know his moves, you can kill him. And my God, the pace they did this at, like, it's one of the most frenetic, impossible to keep up with wrestling matches you've ever seen. And not just that they did lots of stuff and ran around, but all the big moves were quick, 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 outside, inside, everywhere. It was just staggering physical feat of endurance on the part of both men. And then getting into the final stretch, when you're wondering how on earth are they going to keep this up, they brought that chair spot in, which allowed Omega's own plight, his own narrative in this story, the threat to emerge right at the end. It's incredible. Put it this way, there are two things going on in this match. There is an incredible fast-paced bit of spotty wrestling TV, which everybody likes, but people are usually quite critical of from a, I don't know, industry standpoint. And yet there was that emotional core brought about by the end of the match. They literally had their cake and ate it here. Great. Number 3, Kazuchika Okada versus Kota Ibushi. New Japan Pro Wrestling Wrestle Kingdom 14. Alright, here's the really clever technical stuff. This match was, according to my learned colleague Michael Sidgwick, dark arts pacing magic. Basically, the gears they were able to take this up through were superhuman in their layout. They were genius in their construct. They basically managed to craft several different incredible pro wrestling matches, all of which stacked neatly on top of each other, but used different characters and different everythings to create one epic match. Every time one man started to get the upper hand, the other one would reach deep into the darkest parts of themselves and find something to outdo it. Like Okada went through his entire greatest hits of the man he has been at Wrestle Kingdom, culminating, of course, in getting back to that classic 2012 Rainmaker motherfucker by dropping him with a tombstone on the apron. And Ibushi did as well. He kept reaching into himself to find these, like, devious alter egos where he went almost glass-eyed like a shark to start really putting the boots and the fists and his own skull into Okada. Like, this went on for 40 minutes before Okada finally managed to drop him with a Rainmaker. It's just pure New Japan brilliance at its absolute best from two men who have probably now come to define this most recent era of the promotion. Whisper it, but looking at the rest of their year, this might have been the end of that particular era as well. It's going to sound like some really tedious bit of GCSE, like, creative writing here, but the reason Okada won this match was because he was able to find a version deep within himself that you just can't beat, and thus Ibushi couldn't beat him, and thus he lost. It sounds really cliched, and if you've not watched this match, it probably sounds like we're talking an absolute load of trouser, but honestly, give yourself, put 3/4 of an hour aside, get something nice and cold out the fridge, and treat yourself. Number 2, FTR versus the Young Bucks, AEW Full Gear. Honestly, I don't think there's a single spot in pro wrestling history that has better boiled down the essence of a rivalry, be that between two teams or two stables or two individuals or anything like that, has better done a job of just showing you precisely why they're fighting than what happened in this match. Cash Wheeler is the king of the cutoff because FTR's whole thing is they are bringing back the original bonds of tag team wrestling. They are purists, they are classicists or whatever. That's him. And then Nick Jackson is king of the hot tag. He's the man who jumps in, flies around the place. He's new age, he's dangerous, he's a loose cannon, chief. Give me your badge and your gun. Cash Wheeler cannot, under any circumstances, allow this philosophical victory to take place by allowing the Young Bucks to get a hot tag. He needs to cut him off because that is the moral opposite of the hot tag. So seeing that he's in position for a hot tag, he bounds across the entire ring and spears him to the outside. It sounds so simple, but it was so perfect. I'll tell you what's so brilliant about this, right? FTR, pretty much whenever they wrestle the Young Bucks, but particularly in this match, they go through the entire chronology of tag team wrestling, all the old styles, all the modern styles, everything, to try and show that the Young Bucks are terrible and they are not tag team wrestling. They are not what the division should stand for. But of course, by doing so, in the process, what they're actually doing is putting them over, showing how much they have advanced the division in their time in the industry. Like, it's so clever. And that's the reason I mentioned that spot in the match, because the whole idea is that they have advanced all of this, that they have managed to change things by improving them and being progressive. So later, when he tries to do the exact same spot of cutting off the hot tag, Jackson's ready for him, and he manages to counter that into an incredible spot all of its own, because it's not that they don't care about tag team wrestling, it's not that they just ignored all the old styles and ignored all the people who came before them, it's that they did watch that and they learned. And it's not just spots, because the Young Bucks always get accused of just doing spots here and there. There was great story in this match as well. Like, Matt Jackson couldn't do a super kick. That's kind of his thing. And Dash Wilder, he couldn't use his fists, which is kind of his thing as well. So they had to inform this whole other way of doing it. It was just, look, it was just an incredible, incredible celebration of tag team wrestling. In this, the year that we were promised tag team wrestling would return. And of course, how did they win? He attempted a 450 splash. He tried to do the new stuff because they got to that point in the match where he realized that they, the Bucks, had something that they, FTR, did not. So he tried to replicate it, and that's how he lost. They lost both the match and the argument. I'll tell you what, go watch that back, right, and just listen to it, and you tell me how many people are in that crowd, because I guarantee you think it's about 10,000, but of course, it was not. It was only 1,000. Number 1, Kenny Omega and Hangman Page versus the Young Bucks. AEW Revolution. Yeah, on this, the year we were promised the tag team wrestling would return, the two best matches we saw all year were tag team matches, and lo and behold, of all people, the Young Bucks were in them both. Who'd have thought? And you know what? It's not even that this was the best tag team match of the year, or even this was the best match of the year. It's arguable that this is the best tag team match ever. And the thing is, it's arguable that right now the 4 men in this match are probably the most intelligent men in the world for putting together pro wrestling matches. And if you're hearing that sentence and going, really? Then just watch it, man. Like, the little subtextual details in this that go on to inform the overall story of it, in amongst some absolutely unbelievable breakneck action, are just unparalleled this year. Probably unparalleled ever. Christ, I've not seen every wrestling match, but nothing I've seen comes close to this. Like, you gotta think about what's happening here, right? Yes, this is just a tag team match for the tag team championships, but these 4 men are supposed to be friends. They're a part of an elite group. Hey, see what I did there? But of course, at the same time, they are on opposite sides of the ring, and of course, the cracks are starting to appear between Page and Omega. The one-winged angel is busted out, and yet the buckshot is not. And then after the Bucks saying they wouldn't use the golden trigger against them, lo and behold, they use it against Kenny Omega in the midst of an incredible rush of spots, and Omega loses his mind. He kicks out at 1, and everybody watching this jump out of their seats. Think of this match just volleyed your emotions and your sympathy all over the goddamn ring. Like, you have to keep remembering where everybody's heart is in this match, even while trying to comprehend where their head is after just being kicked clean off their body. Those spots I just mentioned there, I mean, if you missed them, of course you did. It was just going that quickly, and it was that fast, and it was that raw, and it was that pure, and it's just the purest distillation of pro wrestling emotion. Every single element of love, of brotherhood, of rivalry, of competition, of hatred, of jealousy, of everything, all in one match. Like, this is not just the match of the year. It's not just the best tag team match of the year. It's, as I say, probably the best tag team match of all time. It is almost certainly one of the best pro wrestling matches of all time. Years to come, we're all going to look back at where pro wrestling is now and how it got to where it is now, and I guarantee you these 4 men's names will be brought up repeatedly with advancing the art form. This match is just layer upon layer of story and narrative and emotional investment, interlaced with a ripper banger spot fest of a wrestling match. This is everything the industry can be, and everything it should aspire to. So that was the year that was, and that was all the pro wrestling that were. I think that's good English. Anyway, let me know your picks for match of the year in the comments below, because it's all just subjective, isn't it? That's all it ever is. Let me know your shouts, and I don't want to hear anything about star ratings down there, okay? The biggest secret in the industry is that they're actually supposed to be out of 10. It's just that Meltzer hates wrestling. Anyway, yes, your shouts down below. Thank you very much for watching. This has been What Culture Wrestling. Whatever you're doing in 2021, I wish you all the luck in the world with it. But if it isn't following me on Twitter at Adam Cleary, you can get bent. Anyway, see you later. Goodbye.